Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
All right.
Yeah. How you doing, Jay?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, we're good, thank you, man. We're good, thanks. Meet my friend John up here.
Hi, Jay.
How you doing, John? You all right?
How's it going? Yeah, good, thank you. Very good.
Too bad. Not too bad.
Cool. So for the benefit of the tape, we're joined by Jay from Players Shows. And what's your business, Jay? Wheel something, isn't it?
It's Hoonigan.
Hoonigan. Oh, you're Hoonigan now?
Yeah, we're Hoonigan now. So we were Wheel Pros. We've transitioned over to Hoonigan, who we bought 4 years ago now.
Oh, amazing.
Been a big sort of big transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my day-to-day job. I run the sort of European side of the business. So, yeah, essentially wheels, suspension, lights, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
We've got a warehouse in the UK in Essex, and I've got another one in Antwerp that I look after.
Oh, cool.
That's my day-to-day job. And, yeah, Players is like it's been a passion project for 17 years now.
Well, we're joined by Jay, and let's jump in. What's your earliest car memory?
Weirdly, it's not my dad's because I grew up as a single parent for the first few years of my life.
Okay.
So I grew up with my mum and my nan in East London.
Yeah.
And we would go down and see my nan's sister. She had two sisters who lived in Dorset.
Yeah.
And one of her sisters randomly was called Rose, but everybody called her Mick.
Of course.
Yeah, it made no sense. Anyway, she was a very interesting woman. She was a chauffeur for the Atomic Energy Foundation, which was based down there.
Oh, okay.
And she would drive all of their executives around. So we're talking, I would have been 8. So we're talking, this is like early 80s.
Okay.
And she had a Mark I Fiesta Supersport.
Nice.
And she was really into her cars. She had a garage. They had this lovely little bungalow down there. And she was the first person who ever taught me anything about cars. And I absolutely loved the Mark I Supersport. I thought it was fantastic.
Nice.
What colour? Black, are they?
It was black with the check interior, the little wheels. Yeah, absolutely killer. And she was actually the first person who ever let me drive their car. Like when I passed my test, jumping forward sort of like 10 years, I passed my test when I was 17. By that point, my mum had remarried.
Yeah.
And my dad was very clever in not letting me drive his car. I would go down to Dorset and Mick would lend me her car and I'd be able to go out driving in that, no problem whatsoever. My dad was completely and utterly right to not let me drive his car.
So I'm hoping you didn't wrap that Fiesta around a tree or something with...
No, I didn't. No. I wrapped a few of my own cars around trees, which is exactly why my dad didn't let me drive his car. But yeah, that was my first foray into cars and I think it was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you remember what any of those chauffeur cars were at all, Jay?
I have absolutely no idea. No,
fair enough.
She never brought any of them home. I never saw any of them. But she was like, she never married, just purely did her job and had a real fascination with cars. She showed me all of the sort of how a car worked and everything. So, yeah, it was, a really cool lady.
Cool.
Nice.
Is she still about? Or...
No, she's long gone, unfortunately. She died when I was 19, which is, 30 years ago now.
What happened to the Fiesta, Jay? Do you remember?
I think she actually part-exited for a Honda Civic.
Oh, right.
Which randomly, when she died, she left to me.
Okay.
And at that point in my life, I had a Ford RS Turbo van, believe it or not. And that Honda Civic was like my normal car.
Yeah.
This van was kind of like my show car, so to speak.
So you kept it for a bit then?
Yeah. Oh, I run it into the ground. I literally run it into the ground. Yeah.
That's quite nice that she left it to you, though. She must have known that you were obviously banging into your cars.
Oh yeah, like by the time I'd passed my test, I was fully immersed in cars, like fully obsessed. My first car was a Mark 1 VW Golf GLS, which started my whole obsession with VWs.
Yeah.
And yeah, she knew that was it. I was just, even when I was a kid, it wasn't Hot Wheels so much, it was more Matchbox.
Yeah.
Really showing my age. And yeah, I used to mess about with RC cars and stuff like that. So she knew that leaving me a car was going to go to good use, and it did.
Yeah.
What was your first memory of kind of your mum or your stepdad's cars?
My mum married my dad when I was about 12.
Okay.
And he was a police officer.
Oh, cool.
And at their wedding, he owned a P6 3.5 litre V8 Rover.
Nice.
And he had the number plate, and I don't ever know what happened to this number plate. He had the number plate 999 ban.
Wow.
Well, my dad passed away 12 years ago, but in my mum's house, she's got their wedding picture, and it's of them standing either side with the number plate between them, which was super cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that was like, he would let me sit in that car when I was a kid, and I would pretend it would sit on the drive, and I'd pretend I was driving. And that was really cool. I've kind of always had a thing for them. I've never wanted to get one, but I just do think they're kind of cool. And that was kind of my first thing with him. And then he was very, very sensible with his money. And he was one of the first people I ever knew, much to my embarrassment, who was into Skodas. And this is the pre-VW.
Yeah.
Engine in the rear Skodas. And we had since moved out of East London and gone to live in Upminster, which was quite a nice area. And a lot of kids at my school, their dads all had Granadas and all of this. And my dad had this, like, it was brand new, but it was a Skoda. And it was back then, they were terrible.
Yeah.
They were the butt of all the car jokes, weren't they, at that point?
Oh, they were horrific.
Yeah.
And I would let him come pick me up from school and that. I'd be like, oh, God, Dad, I will get a bus. I'm not getting into it. Like, yeah. I look back on it now, it's funny. At the time, it was awful.
What colour was it?
The first one was white. And he literally, from that moment on, I was 14, right the way through to when he died, which is 12 years ago now. So I would have been 37, Skodas, constant. And he saw the complete evolution from Czechoslovakian trash to owned by VW.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loved them. At one point, he was thinking about buying a Dolly, a Citroen 2CV, and it was my mum who talked him out of it.
Okay.
Because he thought they were great. And we were like, we would go down to see by that time, my nan had moved down to Dorset with her sisters.
Yeah.
And my mum would be like, they don't do 60 miles an hour. It'll take us like 8 hours to get to Dorset. So, yeah, he was, for a man who had a P6, he was not into cars in the slightest, and neither was my mum.
Yeah. So the Skodas followed the P6, is that right?
Yeah.
And was it just you? You got brothers and sisters, or was it just you in the back? Or
Stepbrother and a stepsister. My stepsister was considerably older, so she'd moved out. But me and my brother were there. And yeah, my brother is 5 years older than me.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was just as embarrassed of the Skodas as well. But he was kind of at the point of getting his own car, and he wanted a MG midget.
Nice.
I can't even remember what his first car was, but yeah, it was a house of shame when it came to vehicle.
Was the Skoda reliable? Did they break down, or?
Oh God, no! Never ever broke down. This thing was impeccably reliable. It was awful. Like, I vaguely remember it having a heater, but that was it. It had nothing, or literally nothing.
I think I saw one, some sort of old Facebook advert was posted the other day of one of those Skodas from sort of the 80s. I actually thought it looked all right in terms of...
Honestly, now I'd have one.
I mean, back then it was...
Yeah.
You were going to get it, weren't you, if you're involved?
Oh God, yeah. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I could look after myself, because otherwise it would have been like horrific. But yeah, I mean, now I'd quite happily have one and mess about with it. And I see a few. Like, I go to a big event in Poland most years, and there's a few out there that the boys make. They look great.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's amazing, really, that pre-VW getting involved, that was a massive thing, wasn't it? For someone to go and invest in a Skoda, you were taking a big risk. But as soon as VW jumped on board, then it was, I wouldn't say it happened overnight. It was quite a slow burner, I guess. But
yeah,
before you knew it, that sort of stigma was gone, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I remember when my dad passed away, I had to go and sell his car, and he had a relatively new Skoda. I can't remember. So it's like 12, like I say, 12 years ago. And it was an estate. And I'd spoken to the guy. He'd bought every single car from Skoda Forest Gate in East London.
I used to live in Forest Gate, weirdly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And
Do you used to sell Skodas?
No comment.
and I took it back to them, and that guy gave me more than the car was worth and said to me, your dad bought one of our first ever cars when we opened as a Skoda dealership, and he bought every single one from us. So yeah, we'll happily take it back.
Yeah.
They were fantastic.
Did you ever go to the dealership with him when he was buying them?
I don't think I did, no. I think, again, I was just too embarrassed. I mean, I don't want to talk ill of him. Obviously, he was my hero, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, his taste in cars was tragic. Absolutely tragic.
Any of them fitted with radios? Were you treated to music while he was driving, or?
Yeah, I think as time passed, because every new one that came out, he would get the new one.
Yeah.
And gradually we got to a point where we got a radio. And it was like, yes, we have a radio. And then they would play some sort of tragic music that me and my brother had to listen to. But then, looking back, he had some cool cars. He had a P6, he had an Avenger.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And literally, so the moment he hit Skoda, all of that went aside. And my mum actually kept one of the Avengers for herself.
Okay.
And that was kind of cool. And it was an orange Avenger, which, I mean, again, sadly enough, I love something like that now.
Yeah.
It's all come round, doesn't it? Like,
yeah,
they spent a long time kind of, you couldn't give them away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you say it all the time. If you had a time machine, some of the cars I've got rid of in the past that I've literally thrown away.
Yeah.
I've got some horrific stories of what I've lost money on or what I could have made money on if I'd kept it.
Yeah. Was your dad hands-on at all? Would he tinker?
Yeah. So when he retired as a policeman, he'd worked at the same station, Barking, from 1967 till he retired in 98.
Wow.
And he then became in charge of the garages there. So he looked after all of the police cars there for another 12 years before he finally retired.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was very hands-on. I think that whole generation were, though. They could do anything. They could build a wall, fix your car, sort your plumbing out.
Yeah.
And like, you know, my son comes to me and I'm like, well, just Google it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
But I'm a gardener, so I work for a lot of elderly people. And some of the older ladies that have lost their partners, they obviously get the likes of me in to cut their grass, but they always say, oh, you know, my Dave, he used to do this, he'd do the garage door, he'd do the wall, he'd do the fence, he'd do everything. So yeah, he's spot on. It's totally true.
It's that generation, they just turn their hands to everything. I don't know whether it was the tradesmen or they just didn't want to spend the money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my son fixes anything that's technical in my house, and my wife does the DIY. She's an expert.
You build the cars.
I don't know what really I do, to be perfectly honest with you.
Are you mechanically minded, Jay?
No, not particularly. I have a basic understanding of it, but anyone who works with me or knows me will tell you that most things I do on a car generally go wrong. So I tend to use professionals. My theory has always been, with anything, whether it be building a wall or a car, I'll work a little bit harder to pay a professional to do it.
Yeah. Because
I'm chronic at most of that stuff. Like Rick, who works here and is my partner with players, like the stuff he has to get me out of that I've put him in, like, I've done this and this, I've taken this apart and this won't work, because he's very mechanically minded. Yeah. And he's like, all right, let's just leave it with me, I'll sort it out.
Do you recall friends when you were growing up with kind of enviable cars? Obviously, most stuff's enviable over a Skoda, but anything which was like, yeah, I wish Dad had.
Might have been someone that had a Lada, potentially.
Yeah, no, so I remember vividly, I won't mention any names, but there was a guy who lived in Upminster, and I would have been 16, and we were all going to a terrible nightclub called Hollywood's in Romford.
Okay.
And he would turn up, this dude, every year. Well, he would turn up every night, and he would always drive. But every year in September, when the new registrations came out, he would always turn up in a brand new car at literally 10 past 12.
Wow.
And I will never forget, he turned up one year in a Mercedes 190E Cosworth. It was a K reg, so I think it was a 92.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, what a dude. That boy is... I actually got to know the guy and I couldn't stand him. But he did have some enviable cars. And like when we were sort of like 15, 16, we would sort of hang around Upminster And we had like older friends who had Granadas and Mark II Escorts. And that's what I grew up on.
Yeah.
Prior to buying my first car, everything was full.
Yeah.
Like we'd go out in our mates, like Mark I and Mark II Escorts. I had both of those. A good friend of mine had a Granada. And they were great cars back in the day. But yeah, I'll never forget standing outside that nightclub and he just pulled up in that Cosworth and I was like, yeah, what a boy.
You've got a 190, haven't you?
Yeah, it's kind of my obsession, sort of.
That's where it's come from.
Yeah. I think that left an imprint on me. And then even as a kid, I was like fully obsessed with motorsport.
Yeah.
I would sit with my great aunt Mick, who I was talking about earlier, and we would watch the F1.
Yeah.
At which she would complain and say they look like rocket ships. Back in my day, they were proper cars. But I got an unhealthy obsession for 90s DTM, which is what then just escalated into desperate need to one day have a 190 Cosworth.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I've got one now.
Lovely.
Did
I was going to ask. Sorry, I was going to ask Jay if there are any memorable journeys in the Skoda that you might have took, like holidays or
Only ones I try to forget, like when we would go down to Dorset and I would sit in the back for 4 hours and there'd be no music.
Yeah.
And then me and my brother quite often would just sit there and literally go back and forth talking about Blackadder too. We were both obsessed with Blackadder and we knew every single line from that whole series because we would watch it and video it and watch it. And we would just sit in the back doing Blackadder too.
Nice.
your parents smoke?
My dad did. My mum didn't.
Yeah.
He was never allowed to smoke in the car because of us.
Okay.
Yeah, my mum was very firm on that. She had no interest in smoking and she was like, no, you're not smoking while they're in the car.
Good on her.
Yeah, good bit of foresight there, yeah.
Yeah, that went out the window when I was older. My dad would smoke when I was in the car when I was like 17. It's terrible now thinking about it. But my dad actually used to roll his own cigarettes.
Yeah.
So he would drive with his knees whilst rolling the cigarette like this. And then he'd just lick it and then spark it. And I do it now. I will still now drive with my knees. And my son will sit next to me and go, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, your granddad Eddie taught me how to do this. Yeah, so.
It's evolving from rollies to...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever see my son driving with his knees, I'll probably slap him. It's not good.
I think you see your parents do it and you think, I reckon I might be able to do that. And you've got to give it a go. And you see if you could just do the length of a road or something.
Yeah.
You're like, I wonder whether I can do that corner.
Yeah.
Like try and just feed it with your knee.
Yeah, my dad was like, because he drove cars for the police, so he could do sort of speed pursuit stuff.
Yeah.
And it was funny because he would always drive in a straight line, relatively slow. And my mum was convinced that he would purposely speed up for the corners because she'd be sitting there quite relaxed. And then all of a sudden she'd be like that, going around the corner. So, yeah, it was always quite funny.
Did you ever get to sit in any of the police cars at all, Jay?
Yeah. I sat in like the old Rovers.
Nice.
And when I was younger, I used to box for the police.
Okay.
I think it was my first 10 amateur fights was boxing for the British police team. Oh, obviously, I was never a policeman or anything. But my dad trained the British police team.
Oh, nice.
So that was how it all evolved. And I would go places in police cars and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Many times I sat in there and asked him to put sirens on and he would never do it. Probably good that he didn't. But no, just put sirens on. Just for a laugh. Let's see what we can do. And, yeah.
Get through this traffic.
Yeah.
Was there a stigma to your dad being a copper?
With my mates, yeah.
Obviously, he picked you up in the Skoda, but...
Yeah. With the people that I was friends with when I was younger, yeah, I mean, your dad being a police officer was like, really?
Bit of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much of a problem, but it was like, yeah, you know, you had to earn your stripes, put it that way.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you mentioned, obviously, your first car was a Golf. What got you into the Golf, and have any of the other cars sort of influenced you on that?
So it was completely random. I assumed that I would end up with a Ford. My dad gave me, which looking back was a lot of money, he gave me £1,000 to buy a car. And he had people that he knew in the car trade. One of them was a good friend, and we went and looked at, I'll never forget, we went and looked at a Beetle.
Yeah.
I'd never had any intention of owning a Beetle, but I just thought, that might be quite cool. We looked at a Beetle, we looked at a couple of Fords, but they were all rotten. And he had a little sort of like, I'm not going to say showroom, like a yard.
Yeah.
So this is like 1992 in Raynham.
Yeah.
And he just happened to say, look, I've got a 1.6 GLS Golf here. And my dad was like, oh, it's a 1.6. Didn't really want him having a 1.6. And he's like, well, it's a GLS, so it'll be relatively easy to insure. It's not a GTI or anything. It's a 5-door.
Yeah.
I went and saw it, and I'll never forget it had a mounty steering wheel. This is the one. Literally, as soon as I got it, I put a Bernini back box on it and a set of teardrop alloys off of what was back then a GTI.
Mark II, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that was it. Bought my first edition of PVW. Bang. Because all my mates had Fords.
Yeah.
I did have like some nice Fords. I had a signal yellow RS2000 and I swapped it for a set of SL1210 Technics decks because I wanted to be a DJ.
Yeah.
They lasted about 6 months, and I gave this car away, and we all know what RS2000's worth nowadays.
Bit more than a set of record decks.
Yeah, exactly. But I quite liked the VWs because it was a bit different to what all my mates had. And I actually got into an accident in that car, which was completely not my fault. One of the few cars when I was younger that wasn't my fault. A woman pulled out in a Cavalier, and I literally went into the side of her doing about 30. Completely totaled this Cavalier, and all I did on the Mark 1 was do the front bumper. And even my dad was like, that's a solid car.
Yeah.
And I just loved them. They were like semi-cool, understated. Whereas, like I say, when you grow up in sort of Essex, everybody's got a Ford. So it was kind of cool.
What colour was the Golf?
It was like, now I know it was champagne silver, but technically it looked gold. So I've since had many champagne silver cars.
I was going to say, you've had a few Mark IIs, haven't you, that colour? Is that kind of a throwback or just fluke?
Yeah, no, it's kind of coincidental, really. It's not a colour I love, but I love old VWs. And I've had 2 champagne silver Mark IIs out of I think I've had about 12 Mark II Golfs in total. And that's just a colour that seems to pop up, and they always work because I've built those cars as kind of granddad spec cars. That colour works for them.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, Jay, you mentioned you got a son yourself. Have you passed on the sort of car bug to him, do you think?
I seem to. He's got a very eclectic taste in cars. He's
not Skodas.
No, not Skodas. I bought him it's like a 2012 Polo as his first car. I wanted him to have a VW, and they're good, safe cars covered in airbags, and it's a 1.2, so it's very fast. But like, he desperately wants either a Mark II Polo bread van or a Hillman Imp as a car that he can work on.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I've steered him towards the bread van because Hillman Imps, as cool as they are death traps. So, yeah, I think at some point he also wants a 944 as well, or instead of.
Yeah.
He's still got to pass his test. I mean, he's failed his theory twice. So he's, much to the abuse that we give him in the office. Yeah, once he passes, he's definitely into it, and he's obviously been at Players forever.
Yeah.
And he's definitely into it. Like, he loves some of the older, more random stuff that I've got.
I seem to recall, did you have a white Mark 1 that you built kind of for him?
Yeah, I did. I had a white Mark 1 Swallowtail that I kind of built 4 different iterations of it. I think it's...
you still got it?
Well, technically, no. I sold it to a gentleman, but I still store it at my workshop. He's never picked it up, or he just bought it. He collects cars, essentially.
Yeah.
He owns a couple of other sort of ex-show Mark 1 Golfs. But yeah, I built that for JJ, and I built it in its last, as it sits now, as a green G60.
Yeah.
Basically, I needed to sell that to get into, at that time, I wanted a Datsun 240Z.
Nice.
But yeah, I still see that car. Anytime I go down my workshop, it's just in storage in the corner.
Tucked away.
Yeah.
Mark II bread van, that's my first car, actually, as it happens.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was actually my wife's first car as well, which is kind of random.
Was it?
Yeah. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, really nice.
Like, I used to go to like Treffens in like Holland back in like the late 90s, and you'd see them all done up, and they were just ridiculous. So I've always had a kind of a soft spot for them.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
I've had a fair few of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, good little cars. If you can get a solid one, then yeah, not very fast, but I think you can learn quite a lot about driving a slow car.
Yeah, they're solid cars, but they're not cheap anymore.
No.
You can buy an absolute rock box, but if you want a solid one, they're reasonable money now.
Yeah, a few grand, yeah.
Yeah, as is everything, unfortunately.
I remember aquaplaning in mine once at about, I was doing 70, let's say, and yeah. That wasn't very nice. That was scary stuff.
Yeah, aquaplaning in any car is scary, but yeah, the Mark II Polos, yeah.
Yeah.
If you could go backwards and just regain one of the cars your dad had, or maybe like Mick had, would you want one? What would you want?
Oh dear. I'd probably go back to the RS 2000. It was super cool. There was nothing wrong with it. Worst thing I ever did really was, I suppose, probably that from a financial point of view.
Mm. Would you go looking for a Mark One Fiesta or something like that to go back to that?
No, I had a Mark II Fiesta for a while, then Mark II XR2. But no, I probably wouldn't do that because I always felt that the VW Golf was better than the Fiesta.
Yeah.
As I say, I've been mildly obsessed with them forever.
Do you think your dad ever had like a dream car, Jay, that he had in his mind that he'd like to have got his hands on?
I think the P6 was his dream car.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. The P6 was his dream car. He got it, and then he never drove it. He never really wanted. He would take it out every now and then, but it sat on his drive. And then I think my parents decided to do an extension, and it was like, right, it's got to go. So that was his dream car.
Okay.
And a friend of mine did have one a few years back, or quite a few years back, and they're not particularly nice to drive. I suppose they are in a certain degree. They're like wafters.
Yeah.
So no, that's not an itch that I desperately want to scratch. I like to remember it as it was. That's the problem. You think of these cars and then you get them and you're like, oh God, they're trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah, like that was the thing for me when I got my 964. I was like, is this going to be as good as I think it's going to be? And thankfully it was, but I've had other cars. Like, to be fair, the Cosworth, it's a great car, but it's slow as, it's not fast in any way. It's a great car, and yeah, you can wring its neck, and that's what I like. I like cars that you can wring its neck and you don't feel like you're going to die. But yeah, I mean, that car is in no way fast by today's standards whatsoever.
Yeah, I've got a 944, and that's a similar scenario, that it's not a fast car, but actually you can be doing some serious pace within it, but you're probably not that far over the speed limit. Like, you're probably not going to do a jail sentence if you get caught.
Literally, I mean, I've had silly fast cars, like 700 horsepower C63Ss, and they're just ridiculous. I mean, my wife drives a new Cayenne Turbo. You don't need a car that fast.
No.
It's outrageous. Everything that I drive is 1992 and older.
Yeah.
964 is the fastest thing I've got. And even that's only 300 horsepower.
Yeah.
Everything else is like 200 horsepower. And I love it. Like, my Scirocco is, you're wringing the neck out of it. My 86, you're just killing it. And I love it. That's, for me, is great.
The 90s stuff, do you think that's sort of a pinnacle era for you? You're like, actually, I don't need anything newer than this. It's got everything I need. It does what I need it to do.
Yeah. For me, I feel like the stuff you grew up with. So, like, in 92... I was 17. So that was the year that my 964 was built and the year that one of my Range Rover Classics was bought. So they were like God cars to me.
I think when you're at school, you kind of see a brand new car, don't you? Like,
yeah,
oh, that's a brand new car. That really is something. So when you get a bit older and you go back to that and you're like...
I started work in 91 when I was 16 and I was working in London, just outside of St Paul's. And I would often see 964s, like the City Boys. And I would just think, God, those cars. Like, and I'll never forget when I first met my wife 22 years ago. I was sharing a flat with a friend of mine. And looking back now, it's probably a little bit weird, but I would have been 26 and I had it was either a Hot Wheels or a Matchbox black 964 just on the windowsill. And she was like, why have you got that? Because it's a bit weird. I'm a grown man. She was like, why have you got that? And I said, that's just my dream car. Like, that's what I've always wanted since I can remember. So, like, going back to sort of meeting your heroes, that was quite lucky when I got that. And it was like, yeah, this is everything I expected it to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm obsessed with sort of 90s cars. 80s cars as well. But, yeah, I mean, I've got a 68 Datsun, which is ridiculous. But, yeah, I'm into, like, that sort of thing. Like, I'll watch 60s racing, which I was never into. I never used to see the purpose of a E-Type or stuff like that, but I love all that stuff now. I think as you get older, you just start to appreciate more things.
Yeah. Do you go to Goodwood? You do players, obviously, but do you do the Goodwoods events? Yeah,
fortunately, my relationship with Goodwood, I'm very lucky. I'm a member of the Road Racing Club, so we get to go to all of their events. I spend a fair bit of time down there. So, yeah, I go to Revival, I go to the members' meeting. I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, they do a good event, don't they?
They know what they're doing. Yeah. Obviously, I work at Festival of Speed because we always have a big booth there. But for me, the members meeting's the best because you haven't got all the fancy pants palaver. It's just the cars racing.
Yeah. About half the crowd, isn't there? You can see stuff.
Yeah. The crowd, like you can get in there. Like at Revival, you have to have a special pass to get in to see the pits, which fortunately I can. But at the members meeting, everyone can walk into the pits, and it's just cool because you can get up close and personal with all of the real spicy stuff.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think it's a good place to kind of wrap it up. Anything else we should have asked you as well? Like any other ones which you'd like to kind of bring up?
No, not really. No, I think we've covered everything, all my sort of old car fascinations.
Cool. I think it's been really good fun. And yeah, really appreciate your time kind of coming on and having a chat with us.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Jay.
Nice to meet you, Jay.
All right, no worries, guys.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye. Cool.
That's nice, wasn't it? Little trip down memory lane in Essex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
East London.
Yeah, he's a nice guy, Jay. Quite a good storyteller. A few people I've spoken to. Remember Lee Sibley came on, the Porsche guy whose dad had a van?
Yeah.
And I mentioned to him that Jay was going to come on. He was like, he's got some great stories.
Hmm.
I had the pleasure, actually, during lockdown, I did an Instagram live video with him.
Yeah.
We had kind of some chats, not particularly about his dad's car, but what got him into cars and things like that. So, yeah, it didn't disappoint. It was a good one.
No, really good. He's got a nice collection of cars himself, hasn't he?
Yeah.
It's good to know that the Essex Ford thing is it's definitely real, isn't it? Certified.
Yeah, although he's kind of he's bucked the stereotype to a certain extent, isn't he? Kind of going with VW, but
True, yeah. Just going back to Lee Sibley, does he have a 964?
no, he's got a 996. He's got two of them actually now.
996. Right, okay.
Yeah, 964 is air cooled. 996 was the first water cooled.
Right, okay.
But yeah, they know each other obviously through Porsches as it happens.
Yeah.
Jay does a show at Goodwood, another one called Flat Six, which is the Porsche show.
Yeah.
So kind of worked together on that previously.
Yeah.
And he's been a guest on Lee's podcast, etc. So
Okay.
cool. Okay, that was well on time, wasn't it, today?
No, I think that'll make for a good edit, actually. Some good stories there. Made me chuckle Auntie Rose, known as Mick.
Yeah, who knows? But
No explanation needed on that one.
yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, John.
All right, mate. No worries.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up and roll the credits.
Thank you for listening to My Dad's Car. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please support us. Buy us a coffee and subscribe. And tell all your friends.